This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome to Island Treasures, a place for caregivers to hear encouragement from other caregivers who, by sharing their experiences, offer helpful information and resources for your caregiving journey. This podcast is brought to you by Alongside Caregiver Consulting, and I am your host, Alison Van Schie from beautiful Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. My guest today is a colleague from right here in the Comox Valley. And when I heard her caregiving story, I asked her to join me on the podcast to share her valuable wisdom and insights that she has gained through her career as a nurse, along with her experience as a sandwich generation caregiver. So please join me now as I welcome Valerie Wiens. Welcome to the podcast, Valerie Wiens. It's so lovely to have you join me today.
Thanks, Alison. It's great to be here. I appreciate you including me in your many interesting podcasts and focus on caregiving. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. So speaking of amazing, let's get to know you a little bit better. And let's start by you telling your caregiving story.
Well, I actually am originally from Manitoba and became a nurse there 37 years ago or so now. And my parents were quite well set up. I had a brother that was benefiting from their child care, and we always thought they would be the ones doing the parent care as they got older. We actually talked about it, but in fact, as my parents got older, they both ended up with quite significant illnesses, and they wanted to move close to be with the nurse because the oldest daughter and the nurse gets to do it all. So it was a big deal for them to move and say goodbye to their family, their siblings from Manitoba, and come all the way to BC. I had offered that, my heart was there. I wanted to help, but I couldn't do much from BC to Manitoba. So they up and moved here, which I guess they called my bluff. So yeah, but it was a real sweet time. And my mom had an unusual disease. It's called progressive supranuclear palsy, and it's kind of like ALS meets Parkinson's and then deteriorates really quickly. So it's almost worse than both of them. It's put together. So she was going downhill quite quickly. And my dad had a cancer diagnosis for years that was spreading. And we knew he was not quite palliative, but he soon became palliative. So they came out here, and I was still working full time with Island Health. I was a case manager and trying to still raise our kids. The youngest one was still finishing grade 12 homeschooling because he had a persistent English course that he took 3 times.
Oh,
I'm not bitter. So I was juggling kids at home, and also our kids actually are Asperger's and ADHD. So they were a little bit, they're fabulous. You wouldn't always know it when you meet them, but they do have a few extra things to consider. And working full-time, and my parents. That was 4 years of quite intense caregiving.
That's a heavy plate to carry.
Mm-hmm.
Very heavy.
Yeah. It was a lot. And right away, I felt the privilege of it, of course, but I soon felt the heaviness of it too. And then, siblings where they couldn't do as much because they didn't live on the island. Well, my sister lived in Victoria, but, there's a lot to navigate with all of that.
Well, and finding them a place to live. How hard was that?
They actually applied and went into assisted living.
Oh,
So they went there just as an apartment with meals already done. So whenever I at least didn't have to worry about that, except of course everyone complains about food when they move into a new place. So I did bring special meals and had them over for suppers and things. But then at least that part was not a big worry. And they moved into, I had hoped they'd move into just an apartment and we could organize it, but this seemed to work for them too. And they had some built-in supports there.
yeah, it sounds like it saved a step for you.
Hmm. Yeah, it did. And then as my mom's disease progressed, my dad was really her primary caregiver and did a great job with her. And as her disease progressed, so that she could really basically just move a finger, she could still talk and she was clear cognitively, but it was slow. And she'd have to go to the bathroom, and my dad would just up and transfer her like nobody else could do or should do. But, husbands and stubborn dads, they just do what they got to do, right? So
He's taking
he,
care of your mom and her dignity,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
was pretty special.
yeah, he did a really good job. Everyone commented on it all the time. He was quite known for it.
But you're looking at it from a nurse's perspective going, no, this transferring is
Yeah.
not safe.
Yeah, watch your back. You've
Yeah.
got, yeah, and he had bone metastases with his
Oh.
cancer. So you knew that if he did some wrong moves, it would actually really damage him. So it wasn't without reason, but you didn't want to take away their decision making either. So
And how long ago was this?
my dad just passed a year and a half ago, and my mom coming up 3. Yeah.
Oh, very recent.
Yeah.
Sorry for your loss on both.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it feels not too long ago in some ways, and it feels a while ago in others. But then my mom moved into a long-term care facility close to my dad, and he still went over there. And by this time, she needed to be fed full time. So it was either the care aides would want to puree her food, and she just hated it, just because she was a choking risk, obviously. But we ended up signing a waiver that she'd rather eat cut up food and taste it. But that meant dad and I did a lot of the feeding. So I would pop in after work. I'd work till 4:30, go there and feed her at 5 a few days a week. Yeah.
That's that dignity piece again. It's significant.
Oh,
She
yeah.
needed to feel that she still had some control, and she still wanted to feel like the food was something important to her.
Right, a really big deal to her. Yeah. And it wasn't because she couldn't chew and swallow, it was because she would cough. And the risk was there, but the benefit was definitely there for her to be able to enjoy the taste of food.
Yeah, and it's great that you can sign a waiver like that.
Hmm. Yeah, that was something that, as perhaps it's because I'm a nurse and I knew where the risk was, and was able to push a little bit on that one, so that we tried to advocate for mom that way.
Yeah, I think that's important. I know when I worked in the nursing home, we had families also sign waivers on choking risks. Again, it's just so important, the dignity and respect of your loved one.
Right. Yeah, and choose where your risks are. Like my mom wasn't actually a falls risk, but a lot of people that go into facilities are. But do you limit them? And sometimes people make a choice to have, as soon as their loved one falls, they want them in a wheelchair all the time and completely eliminate the risk. But you have other risks. So it's always a balancing. Yeah. What's important and what you can live with.
But being a nurse, you've got a heightened awareness of what can happen. And you also have a heightened awareness of what's available to, hip protectors and things like that for fall risks.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. But it is sometimes harder to be a daughter and know too much, and to be in a facility. I didn't want to be the nurse in a facility bossing people around. You want to not alienate them. It was a difficult juggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of difficult juggles, Valerie, what was your biggest struggle as a caregiver for your folks?
Oh, definitely wearing all the hats and feeling like I wasn't being good at any of them. Even towards the end, when my mom was really struggling and dad was getting sicker, and my job was to talk to people who were worried about their parents. I mean, I'd be almost in tears empathizing with them, which, to a point, that's really good to help, and that you have empathy, but you have to be effective as well. And then with my kids at home, like, I don't know how many meals I missed because I was feeding mom, and I'd come home and scramble and put together eggs or something. So nobody was happy with that. And, time and attention on the family. It was definitely juggling all of the things because that, everyone talks about that sandwich generation being.
Yeah, that's what you were. Yeah.
Yeah, too much bread over not enough filling or something. Is that mix the stories? Yeah.
So what's your best takeaway from caregiving and your caregiving experience?
Well, I will credit my husband with this, and he's a wise man, but it was the juggling and feeling like I was constantly not there, and him knowing I was constantly not there, because if I was at home, I felt like, why wasn't I out helping mom? Or dad needed something, I was distracted. When I was there, oh no, our youngest needs help with his English. And like I wasn't fully present at either place. And I was already stretched so thin that he suggested to me that I make some boundaries. And I know this is a common thread. There's some excellent books out there. I know you've got a podcast with addressing this because it is so important. But when you say make boundaries, I've always thought of them as you have to defend yourself. You have to put up fences and they have to be like barbed wire. But they're not. And what I found that was that boundaries gave me such freedom. And I will tell anyone about them. I just think that identifying what I can do, like what is in my wheelhouse. Because to be honest, when I would go with my mom, I would do her fingernails. I would organize all her clothes. I sewed all the backs of her clothes. I did a lot of these things and didn't mind. They were not hard for me to do. But feeding her, I didn't like feeding her. I struggled with that one because it's my mom. I could do it with other people, but that one was a struggle. Whereas my dad didn't have a hard time with that, but he couldn't do the other things. So you might as well identify it. But what the biggest help was, I ended up identifying 3 days a week that I would be there. I'd go from work, I'd eat supper with my dad, and then go feed my mom or change the timing around. I would do any errands. I would sit with them. I would talk to the nurses. I would spend hours, but only 3 days a week. So every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday were mom and dad's. So when I was there, my husband and the kids just knew that they were on their own and they didn't expect me. And when I was home, my parents hopefully knew they were on their own too, although my dad would call with the funniest he wanted Rice Krispies all the time. So
Rice Krispies or Rice Krispie squares?
No, just Rice Krispies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He always would run out and he would tell me, oh, I'm about to run out, but he'd have 3 days left. But it was urgent all of a sudden, all the time.
He was a planner. Yeah, he was a planner.
Yeah, it was quite funny. But I would love to run for another Rice Krispies for my dad now. But at the time, if he asked me one more time, I would have, cried. Yeah. But setting those boundaries was a big deal. It gave me the absolute freedom that I was not obligated to be at the other place where I wasn't. It meant that I could be fully present. And I just think instead of having a victim mentality myself or a martyrdom or feeling always like I had to be on 100% call for everybody, I put things in with little boundaries and boxes, and it worked so well. Yeah, it enabled me to go a lot longer than I probably would have been able to.
And you didn't feel pulled in 50,000 different directions.
No, and I still had 50,000 things to do. Like it still was too much, but the emotional toll decreased, and that means you can actually do them. Or you can say, I can't do this because it doesn't fit into these time frames. It just made things a lot easier on my shoulders. Didn't give me less to do, but I was able to find joy in it again, rather than resenting both places that I was supposed to be and feeling pulled or like I wasn't doing enough. This way I was, even if I was just there to hold my mom's hand and watch a soap opera and talk about it, that was what my day was. That was exactly where I was supposed to be. So, yeah.
Sounds like it really improved your own well-being.
Yeah.
So I do believe you took more away from your caregiving experience. Did you not write a book?
I did. While I was a case manager, I think the biggest question that I have from people is they'd phone and say, hi, I've finally got a case manager. What do we do about mom? And then I was in the middle of it, navigating things and trying to, I knew a lot about how to access different care in the Valley and in BC, just because I've been a nurse for so long and I worked in community. And I was the person doing applications for long-term care facilities. And so I knew the ins and outs. But once you put on your I'm a daughter hat, I felt almost as lost. And I thought, oh, this is why people call. So I started writing a book and just writing down things that I was learning. But then my mom passed away and I paused it for a while just because it was just too hard to write a book called What Do We Do About Mom when you've just lost your mom? And then I picked it up again later on when I felt a little more comfortable with it and wrote What Do We Do About Mom? And it's a pretty simple, short little book, and it just has some insider information on how you access the healthcare system, who the different players are, just because sometimes people will use words interchangeably and not quite know who are all these people that come in. Has a bit of work pages like choosing your goals. A lot of people don't. They just want to do everything, and they don't think about what actually is the most important thing, or what does mom think is the most important thing. And of course, mom can mean dad or your spouse or your child or whoever you're looking after, that you're in that position of being a carer and they're the ones that are needing help.
So it sounds like the goals kind of give you conversation tools so that you know what their wishes are.
Yeah, and making sure that, like I was mentioning before about the falls risk, for example, that you could make the decision that mom shouldn't fall. We're going to have her in a wheelchair so she doesn't have the risk of falling. But if you talk to mom, she'll like, I want to walk and I know I fall. Let's just mitigate the risk there rather than eliminate that risk. And so by actually saying what your goals are, like my mom with eating, she'd much rather, and we talked about it, we'd much rather taste her food and die choking than she would have a longer life on pablum. Like it bothered. I mean, some people you can't avoid it, but she had the ability to make the decision. She could choose. Some people can't choose, and then you don't talk about those goals. But everyone's got something that's important to them, and it's good to know the important things. Like some people hang on to a certain number of birthday, like numbers of birthdays are important, or a wedding, or like identifying what actually is important and supporting your mom or dad in that.
Waiting for that grandchild to be born.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Valerie, I'm really glad you wrote that book because I think it is a resource that people really need.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the insider information, anyways, that of people across Canada, partly because every book I found was talking about the States and their use of the words assisted living were different than ours. One resource I found early on with caregiving was an anonymous group called Working Daughter. And it was fabulous. I was able to vent knowing that my siblings wouldn't hear me, complaining or sounding like I was just getting things off my chest and take it the wrong way. And it was a great group. I've ended up knowing certain people in it a little more than others and our stories. But everything they talked about, I had to remember, oh, yeah, this is American. And oh, yeah. And so I tried to make a more Canadian version that would make sense to different people.
So how did you find this Working Daughter? And I'd love to hear more about it.
Oh, it's on Facebook. There was a Facebook group quite early on. This was a long time ago. And they also she's got a book out now and they have a group online. It's quite worth doing. She's got resources and workingdaughter.com.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out because it sounds like it really helped you. And I think that would be a good resource for other folks as well. So,
Well, just the anonymity of it was really nice because you could find and people with similar stories, and you'd get there. Oh yeah, there's Donna. Oh right, she's got the sibling thing similar to mine, and you can commiserate. Or she's got, she's also doing this type of work, and Working Daughter. That most of the people were trying to juggle jobs at the same time as they were juggling caregiving, which is exactly where I was at.
Yeah. So do you want to tell folks what you're doing now? Like you're not full on working as a nurse now.
No. Once I wrote this book, actually, I was content for it to be whatever I didn't have big goals for it. I was content for it to be helpful and useful. But I did think it would be nice to have some sessions in the community even about how to access assisted living, long-term care, some family support. I just felt like a lot of the conversations I had as a case manager supporting families, so many people were saying, wow, I never knew this, which is partly why I did the book. And then any idea I had for the community, I noticed that Keystone Elder Care was already doing a lot of the same things I would think of. And Wendy was the person that founded this, and she sent an email out to us at work and said she was closing her business unless somebody was interested. And so I sent her my book, and we found that we were quite compatible. And I ended up stepping into her shoes with her clients and buying her business. So I've changed from being a government employee case manager to a private case manager. I'm able to spend more time, I find, with families in the community. And that's a large part of what my role is. I've got a few different things that I do with that business. And one is local, hands-on meeting with people. I've got quite a few clients families live in the States or in other provinces. And I'm very mindful all the time that I think, boy, if my parents had stayed in Manitoba and I had a me there, what would I like? One of the ladies, I took her to an appointment, and it's not strictly just appointments. It's just that I've now got a relationship with her. So if you're going to go into an appointment that you're a little nervous about, or you've got a gynae exam, or you've got a test an eye exam that you're thinking, oh, this is going to hurt. And you've got someone's hand to squeeze, and it's not a stranger. I think that carries a lot of weight. And so after one of similar type of appointment, we went for a manicure. Just a simple one. She needed her nails trimmed and tightened, and it was just a nice little treat. So we'll do things that come up, and then let her family know, because they don't live anywhere near. And they're just, in this case, this family's just like, oh, we're so grateful to have somebody local. And other families I've done, even across BC, where they don't know what to do with their mom. They've got some issues. And so I can help them navigate the healthcare system. And I'm also trained, I'm a TIPA Snow consultant. So I do try to tease out the puzzle pieces as people change with dementia and behaviors that are triggered, as well as just, some resistance to care. If there's some issue going on, trying to tease out what is part of their life that's changed or what's different, and try to understand what's going on. So I can do a consulting session on that, or the other one's called a navigate session. Sorry. It also can turn into an admission if the people are local. But I can do that across Canada, but across BC, just because I know how this health system works very well in BC. I could adapt that to other provinces, but knowing what the next steps are. I find a lot of people say, mom's doing this, and obviously she needs to be in a facility. And they jump to the feeling of safety. But of course, as everyone knows, the wait lists for those facilities are really long. And sometimes it actually isn't the best place. So I love creative problem solving and brainstorming, given what a person tells me are their concerns and what their strengths are, and resources, and try to solve it with them. So there's an online component as well as a hands-on one.
Well, I just envisioned you as a go-go gadget sibling, that you're doing the work of a family member.
Yeah. I tell people sometimes, one lady was telling me just this week, she said, I wish my sons lived closer. And I said, was there something, I just need some things done. I said, well, think of me as your, bonus daughter that you pay to be here, and you can boss me around because you're paying me. You don't have to worry about hurting my feelings.
Yeah. So did she get you up on the roof?
No, I do have boundaries.
Back to the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I think that service is definitely needed. And I know that there are always concerns when the family is away from the loved one. And like you said, you wished there'd have been a you when you were in BC and your folks were in Manitoba.
Yeah. Well, and I send little reports home too. I mean, if there's something that's urgent or I notice something, then for sure. And even one of the clients, the daughter was coming in to visit, flying in, and I'll meet them sometimes. But I did just give her a heads up that dad's losing his filter. So when you come, you'll notice a little difference. He's a little more blunt about things, and always been ever the gentleman. So it was good for her to have that little heads up, so she wasn't shocked by some things that he would say. I mean, intellectually she would know this, but to know that I had just noticed it that week. So I do have the geriatric specialty as a nurse, so I do think about different disease processes, how things interact, and I can give family a little bit more heads up, but just, yeah, be part of their team.
Oh, I'm sure they appreciate that. So tell me a little bit more about the TIPA Snow certification that you just received recently, because I think that we need that in the Valley.
Oh, I'm a big TIPA Snow fan. She's just amazing. I think, I mean, there's a lot of approaches for dementia care and staging and labeling, and you have to know what to expect. But her approach is that you treat people living with dementia. It impacts the whole family, especially husbands and wives. You both are living with dementia. It affects everybody so deeply. And rather than pushing people into what they can do, her approach is very person-centered and ability-centered. Like, well, if mom isn't talking anymore, does mom like a nice where do you touch that's safe? And how do you approach a person? And does she like ice cream? Like trying to bring any level of dementia joy and respect. And I've just been impressed with anything she says. She's got a really good website too, tipasnow.com, that has areas for family as well as professionals. So I took a course, which was actually a lot more involved than I thought. I had a mentor for a little while, and they use something called puzzle pieces. So you look at the person's brain, what's changing in the brain, what changes in the environment, who are the people that are involved in their lives. Just all the different aspects then, and looking at the puzzle. And how a consultant works is you actually send the puzzle to the family and ask, let's work on a couple of these, and what are you seeing? How can we work together? Because it's supposed to be 50-50. I'm not going in there telling them. I'm not lecturing. I'm just trying to figure out a puzzle with them.
And you're giving them something to look at that helps them understand.
Yeah. Well, and prompts them to also know, oh, these are changes. And, oh,
Yeah.
yes, that it's not just an obvious, this is what's happened, so this is why this behavior is coming out. You're trying to look at all of the aspects.
Clever.
Yeah.
So clever that a couple of years ago, I had a podcast, and it was called The Dementia Puzzle, because my guest, Sue Johnston, said, wouldn't it be nice if we could put pieces of a puzzle together, and just as they're losing something or they can do something still, because her mother had dementia. And that was the first time I'd heard of this. So I called it the Dementia Puzzle. But it sounds like TIPA Snow's probably been working on this for a while as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, she's got some good things to say. She's got free videos, a lot of good resources. So, yeah, I'm proud to be part of that.
Proud to wear her badge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's only 2 of you that are certified on the island. Is that correct?
Yes, 2. Well, and there's a third one, and they now work for TIPA Snow internationally. So, but if you look at who's certified in a radius of even 200 kilometers, there's, I think, 6 of us or something. There's not that many. Mm-hmm. In going over to Vancouver and then down into Seattle area, you can expand the circle, and there's not that many.
So, folks, if you have questions about dementia and a positive approach to care, give Valerie a call.
Yes.
So, Valerie, how can folks reach you?
Well, likely the best way is just on the Keystone Elder Care Solutions site. So keystoneeldercaresolutions.com. My email address is info@keystoneeldercare.com. And there's Instagram and other things as well. I'm just, to be honest, not very good at that yet. I've only taken over the business 6 months ago, and I haven't bit off that yet.
I think you've been busy.
I have been. I'm also developing some courses, because there's another part of this business that I would like to work on, and that's Wendy had started some course development beforehand. So, but Keystone for now, elder care, and there's resources on there. There's links to reach me. I do a free 15-minute consult, much like you do on your site, and I try to book those any day of the week at 5 p.m. because they're 15 minutes long, and then I'll work on one issue that somebody brings up and then tell them how I think I would fit if we're a good fit. Sometimes people don't need me, or I always point to free resources. If the Island Health case manager can do what they need, then they don't need to pay someone extra. But quite often I can work in quite a wider range and more often than the case manager in the Valley can.
And you have more time. Like you devote more time. You don't have more time.
Yeah.
You have a lot of demands on your time, but you would devote time to a person that did hire you.
Sure, for sure. And that fluctuates too. People tend to have higher needs and then calms down. Even as a case manager in the community, it was like that. But I had, 90 to 100 people in the community. So I don't have near that now.
Oh, but I know you're busy.
Yeah.
You are hard to nail down.
I know. Things move. Well, and I try to be sensitive too to new people. But yeah, so Keystone, you can find information through there, reach me through there. And my book is still only available on Amazon.ca. So you can buy it there if you want to. And there's a Kindle version as well as a paperback version. Those are the two big places to reach me. And then I have in the book, even I have a lot of resources and links. If you get the Kindle version, they just link over to different health authorities and even to Teepa Snow's webpage, and across Canada, it'll link to each one of the provincial centers for that they can bounce off of. I did a lot of research for that.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fast tracking.
Yeah. The Kindle version is nice that way. You can print pages off, or you can click the links, but it's always nice to hold a paper book too.
Oh, I like to hold a book.
Yeah. And smell it.
Yeah. I'm old school with books and turning pages and putting a bookmark in. Yeah. Some satisfaction in seeing those pages. Although you can see it. You can see the progression on a computer as well, but
I know.
So, Valerie, what tips or words of encouragement do you have for our listeners?
Probably my biggest hope would be that people would use boundaries as a source of strength and a joy, to give you a clear marking of where your gifts are and where you're able to shine, especially if you've got siblings. It'd be nice if you could, or other people that you've hired. It'd be nice to be in an area where this is what I'm comfortable giving. I like giving this, and this does not tax me. And I can't give this. It's a positive as well as the fence that you push against and say, no, actually, that I'm not comfortable at all with that. And that within that, you'd find joy, because caregiving is almost inevitable for all of us in some way. And it would be nice, even if your parents' dynamics and the relationship with them has not been a good one at all. And then even more so, you need boundaries, because what you can give in those situations might be much more restricted, and you might have to hire people or arrange for others. And I'm definitely very alert and aware of narcissistic parents or abusive situations where you're not going to put yourself in the giving, or you are in that role and you're drained. Well, you don't have joy in that at all then. But even in a very difficult or a negative situation, if you can give to your parents out of respect or for their human nature rather than how they gave to you, it's not a judgment, and you can have joy that you gave well, that's an important part too. So I just, the boundaries that can keep you safe and keep you still giving joy and growing, because it is a growing situation. Caregiving just grows you.
Grows and changes.
Mm-hmm.
You raised 2 points I'd like to comment on. One is when you're setting boundaries, you know what you like to do. It's your gift to do what you like to do. So it's like the people who say, I've never worked a day in my life because I like what I do in my job. Right. So if you choose the tasks that really feed you, then that's a good way to use your boundaries. And secondly, if you were a child who had experienced childhood trauma with someone who looked after you, and now you're meant to look after this person, it does call upon an inner strength that might not be there. Mm-hmm. And if you can just remember that that person is now not that person in many ways because they are incapacitated or their health has changed, that could be a tip to help overcome that childhood trauma. But it takes effort, and it takes often a therapist to help you through that.
Sure. And especially when you're in the position that you have to look out for these people. Like as a case manager, we've seen a lot of dysfunctional families that now are called back into their parents' lives to do things, and it's how difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to look at that makes it still I just still think that looking back on my 4 years plus of caregiving my parents, that the growth for me was a good one. It grew a bit of depth and the resilience that there's things that I didn't know I need to grow at the start of the caregiving journey. It was and I look back and I think, yeah, actually I did a really good job, and I gave. And I mean, of course, what I would have learned by the end of my time, compared if I could apply it to the beginning, I would have done better, like everyone. But you live and you learn.
Well, it sounds like you have no regrets, and that's what a lot of people aim to come out of caregiving with, no regrets.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And part of the reason I'm in BC and not in Manitoba was our relationship with my parents was better when I had distance from them. So them moving here was not like I'm lived next door and everything was, all roses. There was some challenges with our relationship. So it was good to have grown through all of that anyways. Yeah.
Well, and again, on trauma and dysfunctional families, having those boundaries in place really is, again, what you're saying. Set yourself some boundaries, and you can have a richer experience. Great tip.
Thank you.
So how would you feel about sharing a personal tidbit with the listeners today?
Well, I know one letter my brother had written to me was something about thanking me, and that I was never happy unless I was caregiving. That was the deepest part of me, that being in a caregiving role was where I shined. And so when our kids left home, that part was also gone, and they flew the coop, empty nest. I mean, slowly, gradually. So this was not sudden. Let's be honest, it took a while. But, we missed them. And we ended up filling their rooms with Maine Coon cats. And we breed Maine Coons and have beautiful cats. And so we turned our attention to that. But oddly enough, through all the caregiving, I cannot keep a plant alive.
Oh.
So everyone has their limitations.
Yeah. Is the breeding and the raising of the Maine Coon cats, is that part of your self-care?
I don't know. It's too much work to be self-care, I think. But, if I'm needing a snuggle, there's definitely lots of options.
So what do you do for self-care, Valerie?
I kayak and I read a lot. Yeah, those are my two biggest things. Yeah. And I do wall decor, like the macrame-ish things. And I signed up for a course so that I could do that. And I haven't started it. It's been a year. I bought all the wool. All excited. So my self-care goal for this upcoming next 6 months, I'm going to pretend I have a course every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. And it'll be the online course that's waited for a year, but I'm going to pretend I have a course. Don't tell my husband or my son and daughter-in-law, because I'm going to tell them it's a course so that I have some motivation to stick to it. And that'll be self-care and a boundary. There you go.
There you go. And it's creative.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And any more books in the offing? Any more books that you plan on writing?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to do a workbook that goes along with this.
Great idea.
Yeah, it's combining one that Wendy's done, where you have all the resources in one place, and a simple workbook. I don't think that's going to be a really large one, just pages to tear out so that it follows the chapters I've done in the book, and has the forms from NIDIS and all those things that you can fill out as you go. And then I have a couple, what do we do about? So I bought the domain whatdowedoabout.com long ago, just because I planned on doing a few books. And what do we do about kittens, or I was going to do one about cats. And then what do we do about raising challenging or unique kids, because I've had to do the off-the-wall creative stuff with them as well. And the kids and I, we've talked about doing different chapters. I'll do a chapter, and then my son will do one, and then I'll do a chapter, and then my daughter. And so they'll each write a bit of the book.
I like that idea.
So that one's going to take a little longer, but those are a couple I have.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
The workbooks, they're always a hit because you get to take it and personalize the content. And I think that's really powerful for folks.
I think so, yeah. And just to set up, this is what you need to do, because otherwise there's so many things. Like, you don't know what's important, how to prioritize. So if you have something simple that you say, fill this out, then you know you can do it. Or the next visitor can work on the next couple pages. It makes it a little more clear.
I like that you bought the next domain name as well, though. Like,
Yeah,
that's forward thinking.
Yeah, I have a few of them. Our oldest son is pretty tech minded. He gave us each our names in a domain for Christmas one year. So
that's cool.
Yeah, ValerieGWiens.com. I had that for ages and didn't do anything with it, but I owned it.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah.
Well, this conversation has been very cool, and I just want to thank you. And I do hope that folks will take a look at your book and find the resources that you have on KeystoneElderCareSolutions.com.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you so much for having me, and for your warmth and your caring, for giving so much of your heart and your time to people. I really appreciate that and see that in you.
I think it's time for me to set some boundaries, Valerie.
Yes, I know. Sometimes we preach to the choir, don't we? Including ourselves. It's something you have to learn.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for today.
Thank you.
Valerie was juggling jobs and caregiving responsibilities, and she needed to find a way to be fully present as a caregiver for her parents and also for her family. That's a tall order, but she found a way to do it, and as a result, she felt freedom by setting boundaries. Valerie's parents have both passed, and she has completed writing her book, What Do We Do About Mom? She has also bought a business so she can share her insider information on how to navigate the healthcare system with caregivers. And she has become a TIPA Snow consultant. Talk about a resource for the community. You may have heard Valerie mention NIDIS forms. Now, NIDIS is a personal planning resource center here in BC, and it's also a great resource. For more information from Valerie, you can reach her through her website, KeystoneElderCare.com. And while you're there, look for her courses, her supports, and her services. And if you find yourself in the midst of your own caregiving journey and need some supports, I invite you to tap into AlongsideCaregiverConsulting.ca or KeystoneElderCare.com, as it is my hope that you too are able to find freedom, increase your joy, and decrease resentment by setting boundaries in your caregiving journey. If you'd like to share your story as a guest on the Island Treasures podcast, please contact me by email at alongsidecaregiverconsulting@shaw.ca. And thank you for tuning in today. And to Valerie Wiens, thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom. If you don't want to miss future episodes, be sure to subscribe to the Island Treasures podcast. See you next episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.